Today, we will be discussing an urgent and pervasive issue affecting millions of girls and women worldwide, female genital mutilation or FGM. This harmful practice has deep-rooted cultural, social, and gender-based implications. It violates fundamental human rights and poses serious health risks to women and girls. So what is female genital mutilation? Female genital mutilation refers to all procedures involving the partial or total removal of the external female genitalia or other injury to the female genital organs for non-medical reasons. This practice, which is performed in several different forms, has no medical benefits and in fact can lead to devastating physical and psychological harm. FGM is carried out predominantly on young girls, and at its core, it is a violation of their rights to health, security, and dignity. FGM is most often carried out on girls between infancy and the age of 15. While the procedure is primarily performed during childhood, adult women can also be subjected to it, although less frequently. The age range makes girls particularly vulnerable to the consequences of the practice, as they are often unable to make informed decisions about their bodies. So what is the reason behind the practice? Why is FGM still practiced despite its severe consequences? The reasons are deeply ingrained in cultural beliefs and societal structures. In societies where FGM is prevalent, it is often seen as an expression of gender inequality. Some communities regard FGM as a rite of passage, marking the transition of a girl into womanhood. Others may use it to suppress a girl's sexuality or to ensure her chastity before marriage. While some argue that FGM is supported by religious texts, it is important to note that neither Islam nor Christianity endorses the practice. Despite this, religious justification is often cited as a rationale for carrying out FGM. Additionally, in many of these communities, FGM is seen as a prerequisite for marriage or inheritance. Without undergoing the procedure, a girl or woman may be deemed unmarriageable or ineligible for other social rights, such as inheritance. This creates intense pressure on families to conform to the practice, as those who choose not to participate face social ostracism and their daughters risk exclusion from society or being seen as undesirable for marriage. So what are the consequences of FGM? FGM has devastating effects on women both physically and emotionally. First, physically, the procedure itself can cause severe pain, excessive bleeding, and infection. In some cases, the injuries can be so severe that they lead to shock or even death. For many women, the effects of FGM persist for a lifetime. It can cause chronic pain, infections that may require medical treatment, and complications during childbirth. Women who have undergone FGM are at a much higher risk of hemorrhage and other serious health issues during pregnancy and delivery. The emotional toll can be just as severe. Psychologically, many survivors experience long-term trauma. The physical and emotional scars can lead to anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder. These girls and women are subjected to a violent and invasive procedure, often without understanding why it's being done or having any say in the matter. The trauma doesn't just end with the procedure. It often lingers for years, if not a lifetime. Additionally, FGM can severely impact a woman's sexual health. It can lead to painful intercourse, decreased sexual pleasure, and long-term psychological damage related to sexual intimacy. The practice is not just about physical harm, but about controlling and diminishing women's autonomy over their own bodies. So for the global prevalence of FGM, according to UNICEF, at least 230 million girls and women from 31 countries across 3 continents have undergone some form of FGM. These countries primarily span regions in Africa, the Middle East, and the parts of Asia. However, FGM European Network highlights that the UNICEF data only includes figures from large-scale national surveys across 27 countries, but in reality, FGM is present in 92 countries worldwide. At least 60 countries are home to diaspora communities, groups of people who practice FGM outside their country of origin in places like Europe, North America, and Australia. But here in the Philippines, a small-scale study conducted among the Maranao people in Lanao del Sur and Muslim women in Zamboanga City documented the existence of FGM in these communities. However, there is no available data regarding the full extent of its prevalence in the country. This indicates that FGM may not be as widespread but still occurs in some regions. According to UNICEF, at least 230 million girls and women from 31 countries across 3 continents have undergone some form of FGM. These countries primarily span regions in Africa, the Middle East, and the parts of Asia. However, NFGM European Network highlights that the UNICEF data only includes figures from large-scale national surveys across 27 countries. But in reality, FGM is present in 92 countries worldwide. At least 60 countries are home to diaspora communities, groups of people who practice FGM outside their country of origin in places like Europe, North America, and Australia. Here in the Philippines, a small-scale study conducted among the Maranao people in Lanao del Sur and Muslim women in Zamboanga City documented the existence of FGM in these communities. However, there is no available data regarding the full extent of its prevalence in the country. This indicates that FGM may not be as widespread but still occurs in some regions.
So, the relative school of thought that can be applied on the topic of female genital mutilation is the anti-essentialist theory. It contends that there is no single category female, pointing instead to the varying perspective, resulting, for example, from the intersection of gender, race, and class.
We now move to the question: how does FGM violates constitutional statutory rights? While often justified by cultural, religious, or social traditions, FGM is a clear violation of fundamental human rights and contradicts legal protections enshrined in the Philippine Constitution and statutory laws. The first statutory right being violated is the right to be protected against discrimination and from violation of their rights by private individuals under Section 5B, Chapter 3, Magna Carta on Women, RA 9710. FGM is not a state sanctioned practice, but mostly practiced by indigenous groups and communities. The state has a duty under the law to protect women of these communities against all forms of violence and discrimination. It is an act of gender based violence rooted in cultural norms that seek to control women's sexuality. By subjecting only women and girls to such harmful procedures, it constitutes discrimination violating their right to bodily autonomy and equality. Another one is found under Section 17, Chapter 4, Magna Carta on Women, RA 9710, which outlines the state's responsibility to provide comprehensive, culturally sensitive, and gender responsive health services and programs for women, respecting religious convictions, family rights, and responsible parenthood while protecting women from hazardous substances and interventions. The statute imposes a protection against abuse on all stages of a woman's life cycle, but also mandates that due respect to their religious convictions be accorded in the performance thereof. It likewise protects women from hazardous interventions such as mutilation of their female reproductive organs, which imposes health risks on them. As to the constitutional rights being violated, the first one is the right to dignity and human rights under Section 11, Article 2 of the Philippine Constitution. The state values the dignity of every human person and guarantees full respect for human rights. The practice of FGM lowers women's dignity and undermines their personal freedom and bodily autonomy. Next is right to the protection of their maternal functions. Section 12, Article 2 of the Philippine Constitution provides that the state shall equally protect the life of the mother and the life of the unborn from conception. The health implications of FGM to the health of women include infertility, complications during childbirth, postpartum hemorrhage, stillbirth, and early neonatal death. Another one is right to prioritized health. Female genital mutilation or FGM directly contradicts Section 11, Article 13 of the Philippine Constitution, which mandates that the state must prioritize the health needs of women and children. FGM causes immediate and long term health complications, including severe pain, excessive bleeding, infections, difficulty in childbirth, and even death. It disregards the constitutional duty to prioritize the health and well being of women and children.
What is the current status now? According to UNICEF, in general, the practice of FGM is becoming less common. In prevailing countries in Africa, education is a pivotal factor. Girls and women with primary education are 30% more likely to oppose it, while 70% more likely if they have received a secondary education. There has been a global movement spearheaded by UNICEF and WHO which calls for a concerted action in all sectors of health, education, finance, justice, and women's affairs. It is mainly towards the awareness and education in order to shape policy making, mainly the outlawing of FGM. However, not all countries have made progress and pace of decline has been uneven and with some countries becoming stagnant. So what can we recommend? We should promote an anti-essentialist approach towards this issue. We should bear in mind that equally important to take into account is the main reason behind the practice, which is the culture of those communities which practice the same. We should also recognize how race, class, and culture shapes women's perspective on FGM, with the end view of creating solutions that work for different communities. One of the recommendations that we can also use relative to anti-essentialist approach is from Kenya's Maasi community leader Nice Neilante Lengete. She took cognizance of the fact that the universal condemnation of FGM might be unacceptable in her community. She instead engaged in extensive dialogues with Maasi leaders, women, and young girls. The cultural significance of rites of passage was acknowledged, and she worked collaboratively to develop alternative rites of passage programs which preserve cultural identity without involving FGM practice.